Hello everyone, and welcome to Fresh Master Channel. Today, we are going to have some story from Reddit. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below. These simple clips mean a lot to the future of this channel.
My soon-to-be ex-wife and I had been together since high school. We started dating at 17 back in 1992, and now at 45, we had nearly 3 decades behind us. She was the only woman I had ever been with. We got married at 22, fresh out of college, and had our first son a year later. A few years after that, our second son was born. Today, they're 22 and 17. For 23 years, I poured everything into our marriage, built a home, worked tirelessly to provide, and did my best to be the husband she deserved. Like any couple, we had our ups and downs, but we always found our way back to each other. That's why discovering her affair hit me like a freight train. The first red flag appeared in March 2020, when I sensed a shift in her behavior. Things had been off for months. I was still recovering from knee surgery after an ACL tear in 2019, stuck at home on workers' comp, unable to do much. Chores piled up. My sons helped, but some tasks had to wait or fell to my wife. Let's call her Sue. She clearly resented it. Our closeness had already been fading before my injury, but after, it vanished completely. Around the same time, Sue started spending more evenings out with coworkers. Between November 2019 and March 2020, it became a pattern. I didn't overthink it. We had always trusted each other. But by January, she had grown noticeably distant. The affection disappeared. No more random hugs, no spontaneous kisses. Her phone, always a source of shared memes and DIY projects, was suddenly off limits. If I so much as glanced at it, she locked the screen. Our conversations became clipped, her tone sharp and defensive. Then COVID hit, and New York shut down. Both of our jobs were deemed essential, so we kept working. By then, I'd finished months of rehab and was eager to get back to normal. But within 2 weeks, Sue's work schedule suddenly changed. She had to stay late every single night, at least 3 hours longer than usual. She'd come home, head straight for the shower, barely say a word to any of us, and go to bed. As my knee improved, I tried to reignite some form of connection, but she was mentally and emotionally absent. By early April, the signs were impossible to ignore. I started digging. Every article I read about infidelity matched her behavior exactly. I checked her social media, photos with coworkers, a lot of group pictures. But one guy kept appearing, always standing too close. Someone I had never even heard of. Then I noticed something strange. I was blocked from his profile. Why the hell would this man block me while being friends with my wife? That's when I knew. She was cheating. I just had to find out how deep it went. By April and May, I took my investigation further. I checked our family phone plan and scrolled through her call and text history. 2 numbers showed up the most, mine and an unknown one. A quick lookup confirmed it was him, the guy from the photos. At this point, I had no doubts. But she had been careful, deleting messages, covering her tracks. I needed undeniable proof. I turned to my best friend Oz. "Did you confront her?" he asked. "No, not yet. I need more." He told me about an app that could sync with our family data plan and record her messages in real time. I set it up, connected it, and waited. It didn't take long. Within days, I had my answer, an endless stream of messages between them, talking about how much fun they had the night before, planning their next meeting. The confirmation hit me like a gut punch. For 2 days, I could barely function. I avoided her. She noticed and kept asking what was wrong. I couldn't even look at her. This was the woman I had spent over 2 decades loving, building a life with, and she had thrown it all away for a man barely older than our son. By the 3rd day, my grief turned into something else. I called Oz. "It's confirmed. Did you confront her?" "No," I said. "I want revenge." A divorce wasn't enough. I wanted to dismantle her life piece by piece. I had read a quote that stuck with me. "The enemy of infidelity is unpredictability." That became my strategy. I was going to make her miserable while secretly plotting my exit. By early June, I was still running the app, collecting more evidence. It wasn't just an affair, it was a full-blown relationship. Sexting, intimate messages, explicit photos, the whole package. At some point, I stopped reading and just archived everything. Then I changed my behavior. I started staying out late, coming home at odd hours, keeping my phone glued to my hand. "What's going on with you?" she asked one night. "Just handling some things," I replied, locking my phone before she could peek. I changed every password she had ever known. We had never hidden anything from each other, until she started her affair. Then, suddenly, her social media and phone passwords had changed under the excuse of security issues. Right. I let a few people in on my plan: Oz, my older sister, and two close friends, Joey and Nina. I trusted them completely and made them swear to keep quiet. I had known Oz since childhood, and Joey and Nina since high school. Pay attention to Nina. She'll matter later. By July, Sue was getting nervous. She started texting and calling more often. What time will you be home? Where are you? What are you up to? The seed of doubt had been planted. She was worried. It even started affecting her interactions with her affair partner, who, at this point, I had started calling Poss. He's pulling away, she texted him. The irony of it all. Then one day, Sue told him they should stop meeting at our house, in case I unexpectedly showed up. Nice to know she had been bringing him into my home. What, are you scared he's cheating on you? Poss joked. That actually pissed her off. Imagine that. My cheating wife, furious at her lover for suggesting that I might be unfaithful. For the record, I wasn't. I was either drinking at Oz's or Joey's place, watching fights, or hanging out with my sister and her husband, Bill. My sister knew about Sue's affair, but I had kept my larger plan under wraps. Bill was notorious for not being able to keep his mouth shut. Sue had no idea what was coming. By October, things escalated. I had kept up the illusion of my own affair for 3 months, and Sue was feeling the distance. I hadn't touched her since July. Not a hug, not a kiss, nothing. Not that she needed it. She was still screwing Poss, just at his place, or motels instead of our house. One afternoon, she called me at work. Can you come home after work? I need to talk to you. I thought maybe she was finally going to confess. But of course she didn't. When I got home, she was standing in the kitchen looking nervous. Are you unhappy with me? She asked. What? I raised an eyebrow. You've been spending too much time away. You don't show me affection. I feel like you're still angry about how I treated you when you were injured. Then came the punchline. Are you cheating on me? I lost it, collapsed on the floor, laughing hysterically. And I mean full Joker laugh. To her, it probably looked like I was dismissing the accusation. In reality, I was dying at the sheer irony. When I finally composed myself, I just shook my head, kissed the top of her head, and walked away. Later that night, I checked the app. I know he's cheating. I asked him, and he literally laughed in my face. He doesn't even care how I feel anymore. I know I've lost him. This is karma. I grinned. She was breaking. Poss tried to console her. If he loved you, you wouldn't have needed me. But I could tell. She was starting to doubt everything. She had betrayed me because I was injured, yet the thought of losing me was shaking her. Pathetic. Meanwhile, I was finalizing my financial plans. I had already met with a divorce attorney in September. With all the evidence I had, I was in a strong position. I moved my money out of our joint account, started apartment hunting, and prepared for the next phase. By November, I ramped things up. That's where my friend Nina came in. For context, Sue never trusted Nina. I had met Nina before I met Sue, and she always saw her as a threat. The feeling was mutual. Nina had seen through her from the start. Nina had been stuck overseas due to the pandemic, but finally returned to NYC. On November 3rd, Oz, Joey, and I took her out for dinner and drinks. That night, Nina had an idea. Let's take some pictures, the kind that'll mess with Sue's head. So we did. By November 5th, Sue saw them. Mutual friends must have noticed how close Nina and I looked in the photos. That night, she tried to bring it up. So, those pictures with Nina, you were kind of handsy. Perfect opportunity. Oh? Like those pictures of you and Poss last year? He was handsy too, but did you see me freaking out? Deer in headlights. I had never mentioned Poss by name before. She scrambled for an explanation. Oh, he's like that with everyone. He's just really friendly. I see how it looked, but there was nothing there. I'm sorry if those pictures hurt you. I'll delete them. I smirked. No, Sue. The pictures aren't what hurt me. I leaned in. The year you spent screwing him while lying to me about working late. That's what hurt me. Vengeance, as Worf from Star Trek once said, is a dish best served cold. From that night on, Sue was desperate. She tried to be affectionate, but I ignored her. Meanwhile, I kept archiving every message she sent to Poss. She told him I'd gotten even worse. He won't even look at me. I feel like he hates me. I do. Then, the bombshell. I can't see you anymore. The guilt is suffocating me. I can't lose him. I love you, Poss, but I'm still in love with my husband. I have to save my marriage. Too late, sweetheart. About 8 months too late. Poss lost it. He doesn't love you the way I do. You're making a mistake. That was the last time they spoke. For the rest of November, Sue was in limbo. She kept trying to figure out if I was actually cheating while ignoring Poss's desperate texts. I'd catch her checking her phone, then quickly putting it away. She had no idea she had already lost me. Phase 2 was complete. The divorce papers were ready, my new studio in Co-op City secured, and my finances locked down. It was time for the final move. Thanksgiving arrived, and my eldest son and his girlfriend hosted a small family gathering. She's studying to be a chef, and the food was incredible. To keep up appearances, I showed Sue affection, hugs, cheek kisses, arms around her. She soaked it up, loving every second. It was the first time I had touched her since October, and honestly, it made my skin crawl. But I had to play the part, especially in front of our boys. After dinner, our youngest stayed over with his brother, so Sue and I drove home. On the way, she thanked me. "I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you." I barely held back laughter and replied, "I know, I just need time." That night, for the first time in months, we had sex. It wasn't passion, it was closure. When I finished, I got up, showered, and slept in my office. She noticed I used a rubber for the first time in 20 years, but didn't ask why. No way was I going raw after she'd been with Poss unprotected. The next morning, I checked my spy app. For the first time in weeks, she responded to Poss. He sent a long-winded plea, begging her to leave me. "You've been a prisoner for 23 years. You deserve real love." This 27-year-old was obsessed with a 45-year-old married mother of 2. Pathetic. She gave him the same speech. She loved him, cherished their time, but couldn't lose me. "I'm still in love with my husband, but you'll always have a place in my heart." He begged to see her one last time. She agreed. One for the road. I couldn't even be mad. I did the same the night before. Of course, I archived everything. By December 4th, Phase 3 began. Papers were filed, my new place secured, and it was time to move out. First, I had to tell my boys. That Friday, I called my eldest over and sat them both down. "Your mother's been cheating on me for over a year. I'm filing for divorce." My youngest was devastated. His first girlfriend had cheated on him just months earlier. Now his mother had done the same to his father. My eldest handled it better and suggested his brother move in with him for a while. I agreed. Before they left, my eldest asked, "Are you going to be okay?" I nodded. "Yes, son. And so will you. We'll get through this." And just like that, they were gone. The hardest part was over. Now time for the final blow. With Oz's help, I slowly moved my valuables out. He took only what she wouldn't immediately notice. I also got a new phone and number, giving it only to those who mattered. Meanwhile, I kept up the act, just enough affection to keep Sue off my trail. She was still texting Poss, not as much, but the emotional bond was still there. All the while, I documented everything: texts, emails, photos, call logs, thousands of pages printed, categorized, and bound into 14 neatly wrapped binders. I labeled them for my mother, her parents, her siblings, her HR department. Poss worked there too. Strict no fraternization policy. Her friends, Poss, and his parents. On December 16th, I shipped them. Estimated delivery, December 22nd, 24th, Christmas Eve. Sue came home, showered, and spent the evening with me. One last time, I slept with her. Then she went to bed, completely unaware. It was time. In the middle of the night, I wrapped the final binder, taped the divorce papers inside, and left a note on top. "Merry Christmas." Next to it, I placed my old phone and my lawyer's business card. I packed 2 backpacks and walked out of the home I had built over 23 years. For the last time. To Sue, I vanished, ghosted. She's blocked everywhere, but oddly, she hasn't blocked me. So I've watched the fallout unfold in real time. Every package arrived. She was crucified. Her youngest sister tore into her. Her parents disowned her. My mom? Oh, she annihilated her. Sue has been desperately searching for me, but no one is talking. Her Facebook is a disaster. Vague apologies, desperate pleas for me to reach out. She knows I've seen the destruction. The best part? A mutual friend from her company informed me she and Poss were placed on administrative leave. Sue is likely entering 2021 unemployed. As for the last 2 binders, one went to my lawyer. The other? I set aside to burn in Joey's fire pit once the divorce was finalized. Do I feel guilty? Not even a little. For 23 years, I did everything I could to be a good husband to this woman. I gave her the home she dreamed of, the family she wanted, and a life I believed we both deserved. My love for her was unwavering. I stayed faithful, never wavered, and never even entertained the idea of breaking my vows. Whenever problems arose, I faced them head on, talking things through with her and working toward solutions. But when she had issues, instead of coming to me, she turned to another man, betraying not just me, but our entire life together. She threw away our marriage, our family, and everything we built, all for a fleeting thrill with some young guy who made her feel alive. So no, I don't feel the slightest bit sorry for her. As far as I'm concerned, she can rot in hell. At most, I might lose the house, a car, and a bit of money in alimony. But since I filed on grounds of infidelity, something New York allows in specific cases, my lawyer is confident she won't get a single cent. To me, she's as good as dead. I'm moving forward and never looking back. Christmas Day marked my first full day in my new apartment. It still needed some work, but for the next couple of years, it would be home. My sons and my eldest girlfriend came over to celebrate, and she even brought homemade treats and cooked an amazing meal. For the first time in a long while, I sat down and had real conversations with my boys, and it felt good. My sister also dropped by with more food and finally got to spend time with her nephews after nearly a year apart. Having them all there lifted my spirits because, honestly, if I had been alone, I probably would have just drowned myself in booze. By around 8, everyone had gone, so I decided to stop by Joey and his wife Claudia's place. Spent a few hours catching up, had a couple of drinks, then headed home. A few days later, on December 29th, I got a text from Nina asking if I was free that evening. Since I had nothing going on, we made plans to meet after work. We ended up at a small diner near my job, one of the few places still offering limited indoor dining. Once we sat down and ordered, she laid everything out on the table, and honestly, I saw it coming. She admitted she'd had feelings for me since we were teenagers, but before she had the chance to say anything, Sue swooped in and took me off the market. I wasn't shocked. I've known Nina even longer than I knew Sue. 2 years longer, to be exact. Back in the high school, we were outsiders, the rave kids who didn't quite fit in anywhere. Nina was different back then, overweight, diabetic, and the goth girl most guys overlooked. But she was always cool, and we had a connection. Fast forward to today, and she's a personal trainer and yoga instructor. The awkward girl from our past had transformed, and I couldn't help but notice. She told me she had willingly stepped aside all those years ago, even though she cared about me, just to let me have my shot with Sue. That hit me in a way I didn't expect. That kind of selflessness, putting someone else's happiness ahead of your own, that's real love. Long story short, we agreed that once my divorce was finalized, we'd give things a real shot. And well, that night, she came back to my place, and let's just say it was one hell of a night. Do I regret it? Not one bit. Nina has been a better friend to me than Sue ever was. This wasn't about revenge or a rebound. It felt right, and I planned to see where it would lead, giving it my full commitment. This past Monday, I got a call from my lawyer. Sue's attorney had scheduled a meeting for January 6th to discuss the divorce terms. The day before, I sat down with my lawyer to go over exactly what I wanted, an uncontested divorce based on marital neglect. My conditions were straightforward. Split everything evenly, sell my share of the house to Sue. Each of us keeps our cars. I retain my cabin in the Poconos, and under the grounds of marital neglect, she gets no spousal support. Our youngest son could choose where he wanted to live, and chances were he'd pick me. When Wednesday came, I walked into my lawyer's office dressed in all black, full Johnny Cash mode. When Sue arrived, she looked terrible, barely holding it together. I didn't give her so much as a sympathetic glance, just cold indifference. Her lawyer tried to push for reconciliation, but I shot it down before they even finished explaining. That chapter was over. There was no fixing it. After some back and forth, we settled on a legal separation leading to an uncontested divorce. The only adjustment was that I'd pay her $653 a month in temporary spousal support to cover utilities, only until she got another job. Oh, and did I mention she got fired for sleeping with Paz, and so did he. She's entitled to that support for up to a year after the divorce is finalized. But she's got plenty of savings, and I make enough that it won't even make a dent in my finances, no matter how long she drags her feet on finding work. So here we are. She lost everything, her marriage, her reputation, and her job. I walked away clean. Once the finalization date passes, she's completely on her own, a small price to pay for getting rid of her cheating A. The whole process should wrap up in about 3 months, so unless there are any surprises, I'll be free of her by early April. As the meeting wrapped up, my lawyer shared a few final thoughts, assuring me he'd keep me updated as things moved forward. The second I stepped outside, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Sue was chasing after me. "Can we talk?" she asked hesitantly. I decided to let her have this moment. She had kept a straight face throughout the meeting, but as soon as we were out in the open, the act fell apart. Her shoulders shook as she broke into tears, gasping between apologies. She kept saying she never meant for things to go so far, that she never expected to develop feelings for Poss. It wasn't until she thought I had been unfaithful that she realized how deeply she had betrayed me. Then she asked if I could ever forgive her, if maybe after some time had passed, we could find a way back to each other. "I don't know how to live without you," she whispered, voice trembling. I met her gaze with nothing but indifference. "You'll have to figure it out because this is the last time we'll ever speak." She inhaled sharply, her body going rigid. "Our son is nearly grown," I continued. "He's old enough to decide his own path. I gave you more than 2 decades of my life, every bit of love, trust, and loyalty I had. And you threw it away. You fell for someone else. You turned to him when you should have turned to me. Do you really think there's anything left to salvage?" Her face crumpled as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I loved the person you used to be," I said evenly. "But the woman standing in front of me? I feel nothing but disgust. If I never see you again, it'll still be too soon." We stood there, surrounded by the noise of Midtown Manhattan, her sobbing while strangers glanced in our direction. I wasn't interested in humiliating her any further. She had already done that to herself, both personally and professionally. But I had one last thing to say. "I don't regret the years I spent as your husband," I admitted. "What I regret is that, in the end, you took the easy way out instead of fighting for what we had." And just as I turned to leave, a phrase surfaced in my mind, something I had read once, something that felt perfectly fitting for this moment. "For 23 years, I thought you were mine. Turns out I was just another stop along the way." Without another glance, I put in my earbuds, turned my back on her, and walked away. That night, my phone rang. It was her father. "I don't even know what to say," he muttered, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You were always good to her. I raised her better than this. I'm ashamed. I won't pretend it didn't hit me. Ever since my own father passed away, he had filled that role in my life. But staying connected to her family, that wasn't something I could do anymore." After that call, I logged onto Facebook and changed my relationship status to divorced. It wasn't legally finalized yet, but in my mind, it had been over for a long time. Since I rarely post, it got attention. My inbox flooded with messages from people wanting to know what had happened. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them straight up that I had filed for divorce that morning. Not long after, Nina called, surprised. "You actually went through with it?" She had known I was planning to, but she hadn't realized how far along I was. "Can I come over?" Of course. She wasted no time. She showed up at my place, and let's just say the night ended exactly how we both wanted it to. But this time she stayed. We lay in bed for hours, just talking, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Being with Nina felt easy, like breathing. She understood me in a way Sue never did. Since the moment she opened up to me, she had been the only thing on my mind. Some people might say I'm moving on too fast, but in my eyes, my marriage ended the second Sue made her choice. So if anything, I'm long overdue. The divorce is moving forward, and I'm moving on with Nina. I once swore I'd never get married again, but that was before Nina admitted how she felt. And now I can't deny I feel the same way. We're keeping things quiet until the divorce is final, taking it slow. As for Sue, I don't care what happens to her. She could move Poss into our old house and it wouldn't make a difference to me. She'll get her payout for the house in quarterly installments over the next year. Aside from the court-ordered $653 I have to send her each month, I'll never have to see or speak to her again. To everyone who supported me through this, thank you. Just when I thought I could finally close this chapter, I got hit with one last twist. Last night, Sue tried to take her own life. I've spent hours sitting with this, trying to process how I feel. I don't want her dead, but I also don't feel anything for her anymore. She made her choices, set this whole thing in motion, and now she's living with the consequences. She got to keep the house, her car, and her share of our assets. I walked away with mine, my car, my motorcycle, my boat, and my place in the Poconos. The last time we spoke, she made one final attempt to justify what she did, begging me for another chance once the divorce was final. I told her no. Then I walked away and I haven't looked back since. Last night was a turning point. Only my closest circle, my 2 sons, my sister, my mother, and a handful of trusted friends, have my updated contact information. I've blocked my soon-to-be ex-wife on every platform. She has no direct way to reach me. But a few mutual acquaintances still have access. I was at home, unwinding in my apartment, and when I got a call through Messenger from one of the rare people who hadn't cut ties with Sue after everything came to light. The moment I answered, she skipped the usual small talk and went straight to the point. I went to check on Sue. Found her unconscious in her bedroom, foaming at the mouth. There were 2 empty pill bottles next to her. She had been rushed to the ICU, her condition critical but stable. Doctors believed she would pull through, but it was clear she wasn't in good shape. She had begged for me, pleaded for me to come see her. Her parents and 2 of her sisters were already at the hospital, likely called after the medical staff failed to reach me. My guess? Sue still had my old number listed as her emergency contact. I didn't even hesitate. No, Sue is no longer my concern. She made her choices, and now she has to live with them. Her family is there. They can help her figure out what comes next. But as far as I'm concerned, she and I are done. Then I ended the call. I managed to get a few hours of sleep before my sons called the next morning. They had heard about what happened. "Dad, did you know?" "Yeah, I knew," I said simply. Then I made myself clear. "If you two want to be there for her, I won't stand in your way. She's still your mother. But as for me, I'm done. I don't care what happens to her anymore." They were surprised, but they respected my decision. Now that the news had spread, people who had distanced themselves from her weeks ago suddenly started crawling back, acting as if they cared. My inbox filled with messages, people telling me I should be there for her, that no matter what had happened, she needed my support. And then, the kicker, her affair partner actually tried to visit her. He was turned away at the hospital doors since he wasn't family. Now, I'm being bombarded with guilt trips and demands to go see her. But I feel absolutely nothing for this woman anymore. I haven't for a long time. I detached myself while setting things right, and I stand by every single decision I made. If anything, this just fuels my resentment. She was the one who was unfaithful. She was the one who thought a nearly year-long affair with a guy barely older than our eldest son was worth throwing away 23 years of marriage. And now that she has to deal with the consequences of her actions, she chooses the most selfish way to cope. And what happens? She survives. And suddenly, she's the sufferer. The same people who condemned her just weeks ago are now rallying behind her, and somehow I'm the villain, the cold, unforgiving ex-husband who refuses to care. Not her father, though. He called and told me he respected my decision to stay away. I appreciated that. It's like I never really knew who she was at all. I won't deny that the way I handled things might have put her in a bad place mentally. But I also can't ignore another possibility. This may have been calculated. Either she suffered a complete breakdown, or she saw a way to regain sympathy from the people who had abandoned her. She cheated on me. And now she's the one everyone is worried about. I know this might sound bitter, but I don't care. I just needed to get this off my chest. If anyone wants to judge me for how I feel, save your breath. After 23 years and 2 kids, I never truly knew this woman, and I never will. One last update. Sue's father called again. She has been moved from the ICU to a mental health facility where they're monitoring her condition. She's awake, aware, but emotionally drained. He told me she had asked if I had come to see her. When he told her no, she completely shut down. He reassured me that he would only update me if I asked. And I don't plan on asking. I've also scheduled counseling for my youngest son. His first session is this coming Monday. Today, despite everything I said, I ended up going to see Sue. She has been out of the hospital for 4 days now, and oddly enough, it was Nina who convinced me to do it. She told me that the only way I'd ever be able to fully let go of my resentment was to see Sue one last time, to face her at her weakest. So I did. At around 6 p.m., I made a call I never thought I would, my first time speaking to her since serving the papers. The voice that answered wasn't the warm, cheerful one I had known for over 2 decades. It was hoarse, drained of all energy. The second she recognized me, she broke down in tears. It took nearly 3 minutes before she could compose herself enough to speak. Before she could get a word in, I told her I'd be there by 8 p.m. She simply agreed. The drive from my new place in Co-op City back to what used to be my home took about an hour and a half. I grabbed a quick bite at a small pizzeria on the way, before pulling into the driveway at exactly 7:47 p.m. She was already standing at the door, waiting. As I approached, I got a good look at her. She looked frail, almost skeletal, like she had been hollowed out from the inside. The first thing she did was try to hug me. I stopped her immediately. She seemed to understand that I wasn't there to offer comfort and backed off. We moved to the living room, and almost as soon as we sat down, she told me she needed to confess everything. She admitted that the weight of what she had done had consumed her. Ever since we signed the separation agreement, she had spiraled, drowning in guilt and regret. It was that unbearable shame that pushed her to the edge. The friend who had called me from the hospital had apparently noticed her decline and had been checking in on her. According to the doctors, if she had been found even an hour later, she wouldn't have made it. She confessed that she had failed me as a wife. She knew her feelings for Poss were wrong, but she let things progress anyway. She apologized for sharing our private life with him, for bad-mouthing me behind my back, for betraying everything we had built. She never thought she would become the kind of person who could do something so low, but she had. I thought I was doing the right thing, she admitted. But when I believed you were cheating, it crushed me. That feeling of betrayal was suffocating. I just wanted out as fast as possible. But by then, it was already too late. Then she asked, "When did you stop caring?" I didn't even hesitate. "The night you accused me of cheating," I said. "You stood there, full of self-righteous certainty, knowing damn well you'd been sleeping with Poss for months. That's when I lost all respect for you. That's when I knew I was going through with my plan." She told me that when she woke up on Christmas morning and found the gift I left behind, she was overwhelmed with joy, until she actually opened it. The realization of what it was, what it meant, and just how much I had known sent her into a spiral. She hasn't stepped foot in our bedroom since. The days that followed were spent desperately trying to track me down. She took to Facebook asking if anyone knew where I was, only to be met with an onslaught of condemnation. She had no idea how quickly and completely her world had collapsed. That's when I told her about the other binders. The look of pure shock on her face was priceless. It all clicked in that moment. She finally understood. I had orchestrated every bit of it. The fallout, the loss of her friends, the disgrace in front of her family, her career crumbling beneath her. Every single consequence was intentional. She sat there, completely stunned, processing the reality that her destruction hadn't just been bad luck. It was deliberate. I left her sitting in silence and went to the bathroom. The place was a disaster. The mirror was cracked, bottles and toiletries were scattered everywhere, and the bathtub looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the night she was hospitalized. When I returned, she had her face buried in her hands, sobbing, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. They say the true opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And that's exactly what I felt as I watched her unravel. She finally looked up at me, her tear-streaked face filled with regret. "I ruined everything," she whispered. "I destroyed us, and I have no idea how to fix it. I can't do this alone." "You have your family," I said. "You have the friend who saved your life. You have our sons, but you don't have me, and you never will again." She begged me one last time for another chance. "I came here to give you closure," I told her. "But once I walk out that door, that's it. I'm never looking back." At some point, the conversation shifted to Poss. She admitted that he had reached out 2 days ago. They talked for hours before she finally told him to move on, find someone younger, and erase her from his life. As our conversation neared its end, she gave me one last apology for betraying me and asked, "Is this really it?" I locked eyes with her, unflinching. "Yes, it ended long before I served you those divorce papers on Christmas." That was my cue to leave. There was nothing more to say. I left her sitting there, walked out, shut the door behind me, got in my car, and drove home. It's 2:56 a.m. as I type this, and I needed to get it all down while it was fresh. This is it. The chapter of my life that included Sue is officially closed. My son and I both have counseling scheduled in the coming weeks. Nina and I are still solid, sticking to our plan of keeping things quiet until the divorce is finalized. I'm staying focused, moving forward, and building a future with someone who has always valued and respected me, because she's been doing so silently for years. It's time to put my energy into what's ahead. Maybe I'll check back in when everything is legally finalized. And for those who praised how I handled things, I won't lie. I wish it had never come to this. But if I could go back and do it all over again, I wouldn't change a damn thing. Well, except maybe making sure Poss suffered a little more than just losing his job. And to that one guy who's been maltreating me, claiming I deserved this because I forced my wife into marriage. Seek help. That's all. I'm done. I'm moving on. A lot of people have been asking about my youngest son, and I want to start with an update on him. Just a few days after everything unraveled, he began therapy. I attended his first 2 sessions with him, but since then, he's been going on his own twice a week. The difference has been noticeable. It's helping him. On the surface, he seems to be managing well, but I can tell that his trust in relationships has been deeply shaken. Between his own experience with betrayal, his mother's actions, and the aftermath of her self-destruction attempt, I know it's something that will take years, maybe even decades, to fully heal. What I recently found out, though, made it even worse. His breakup was more painful than he initially let on. He actually walked in on his ex-girlfriend making out with a guy he had considered a close friend, someone who had only gotten close to him as a way to get to her. He never told me that part before. My heart aches for him. No parent wants to see their child experience that level of betrayal, especially at such a pivotal age. You do everything in your power to shield them, but life has a way of dealing its own blows. He's committed to continuing therapy long-term, and I've made it clear that if he ever needs to talk about anything, nothing is off limits. As for me, I've been going to therapy as well. If you've been following my journey, it's obvious that I have anger issues. What's strange is that I've never been the type to lose control. I've always been measured, composed, the type of person who internalizes things rather than reacts. But everything that happened woke something up inside me. I became someone else entirely, someone calculated, relentless, and, if I'm being honest, vengeful. When I laid everything out for my therapist, every detail of what I did to Sue, his reaction caught me off guard. He wasn't just surprised, he was torn between being impressed and disturbed. Apparently, I exhibit sociopathic tendencies when provoked, which, honestly, doesn't surprise me at all given my actions. My sessions aren't dramatic. It's more about untangling everything in my mind, making sense of the wreckage, and trying to restore balance. Now, let's talk about Nina. I have no idea where I'd be without her. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd have someone so nurturing, understanding, and patient by my side through all of this. We're still going strong, and despite our best efforts to keep things quiet, our relationship isn't exactly a secret anymore. She gets me in a way no one else ever has. She knows what betrayal feels like. She was cheated on by someone she invested years into, so she understands what I'm going through better than anyone. She does everything she can to help me process my emotions. We split our time between my place and hers. The idea of moving in together has come up more than once, but it's not in the cards right now. Her 5-year-old daughter is the biggest factor. My place isn't set up for 3 people, and I'm locked into my lease until 2022. For now, we've settled into a rhythm. When her daughter is with her father, she stays with me, and when she has her daughter, I stay at her place. Speaking of her daughter, she's an incredible kid, and I adore her. The feeling seems to be mutual. It's hard to put into words just how much Nina means to me. If you haven't been following my story, here's some background. Nina has secretly been in love with me since we were teenagers, but back then, she was the girl no one noticed. Overweight, diabetic, convinced she had no chance. She stood by, silently watching me fall in love with, date, and eventually marry Sue, holding back how she felt for over 25 years. She never told me the truth until after my divorce hearing, when we went out to dinner and she finally laid it all on the table. I still can't believe how lucky I am to have her in my life. We talk about the future a lot, but marriage isn't something either of us is interested in. We've both been burned before. Instead, we've talked about a civil union down the line, something more practical, without all the legal entanglements. We're in no rush to make a decision, but one thing is certain. We're it for each other. As for Sue, there's nothing left to say. After our last conversation following her self-destruction attempt, I cut off all contact. I have no idea how she's doing, and I have zero interest in finding out. In my mind, she no longer exists. That's really all there is to update. Life moves forward. It's March 2nd as I type this, which means just one more month until my divorce is legally finalized. A few weeks from now, I'll officially be free, and I'm counting down the days until I can truly turn the page. Just to clarify, I misspoke in a previous post when I mentioned being clinically diagnosed as a sociopath. That was an assumption on my part. My therapist only said I display sociopathic tendencies when pushed. He never gave me an actual diagnosis. Also, my oldest son, 22, isn't planning on going after POS. He said what he said in the heat of the moment. And now for the final update. On April 13th, exactly 1 month ago, my divorce was finalized. Initially, my lawyer told me the paperwork would go through on the 18th, but with the city reopening and processing moving faster than expected, it was pushed through a few days early. On April 12th, I got a call from Jeff, my attorney. He asked me to come by his office the next day. When I arrived, he handed me the finalization papers and shook my hand. I didn't just shake his back, I pulled him into a hug and thanked him for everything he had done for me. On the drive home, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my mind. The last 24 years, all the highs and lows, every moment leading up to this point. And then, the moment I stepped into my apartment, it finally hit me. I collapsed to the floor, and every emotion I had buried over the past year came rushing out at once. I haven't cried like that in years, but it wasn't sadness, not at all. It felt like my soul had been released after being chained in the darkest abyss for far too long. That night, I made just one phone call. To my oldest son, I kept it short. "It's done. Your mother and I are officially divorced." He asked how I felt. He probably could tell I'd been crying. "I'm good," I said. Then I spoke with my youngest for almost 90 minutes. His older brother and his fiancée have been looking after him, making sure he's doing okay. And he's still keeping up with therapy, just like I am. I won't get into all the details of what we talked about, but there's still work to be done, especially when it comes to how he views relationships now. For now, I'm focusing on what's ahead. I've rebuilt my life from the ground up. I'm with someone who truly values me, and I'm finally at peace. And that's where I'll leave it. That night, as always, Nina came over. I told her the news. She didn't say a word. She just wrapped her arms around me, holding me close, like she knew exactly what I needed at that moment. And yes, I cried again. Once I pulled myself together, she looked me straight in the eyes and told me that she would never betray me, that she loved me with everything she had. And I believed her, without a doubt. I know some might criticize me for saying this, but while I don't regret the life I built with Sue, after all, she gave me 2 incredible sons, I see things clearly now. I chose the wrong woman. In just the past few months, Nina has given me more than I ever thought possible, without expecting anything in return. The only thing she has ever wanted was for me to be present. I won't go on and on about her, but the truth is, she saved me. In the days following my divorce, something unexpected happened. POS reached out to me. The first thing he did was apologize for his role in everything. He gave me a rundown of what had happened after his mother received the binder I sent. Apparently, she lost it when she found out what he had done, breaking up a 23-year marriage. She kicked him out immediately. Within a week, when his employer got the same evidence, he was fired. Since then, he's been couch surfing, struggling to land another job. He admitted that he had wanted to reach out before, but he was scared. His exact words? "If you managed to find me once, I figured you could do it again." I could have made things worse for him, but I didn't. Instead, I just asked him a few questions. The biggest one, when was the last time he had seen Sue? Turns out he hadn't seen her in months. The last time they spoke, she told him to move on and forget she ever existed. Ironically, the same words she had once thrown at me. At least she had been consistent about that. POS was surprisingly open. I suppose he was looking for some kind of redemption, some way to make peace with the mess he created. Most of what he said lined up with what I had already gathered from text records. I didn't say much. I just let him talk. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes before he apologized again. That's when I decided to leave him with something to think about. "You're 27 years old, and for the rest of your life, you'll have to live knowing that your own mother despises you for destroying a marriage that lasted nearly as long as you've been alive. You reached out because karma is eating at you, but I won't give you closure. When I was your age, I was building something, creating a future. Right now, you're just a homeless, unemployed homewrecker. If you're smart, you'll take this as a lesson. If you're not, you'll stay a screw-up until you reach my age. Assuming you make it that far. I'd wish you luck, but you don't need luck. You need to fix your life." Then I blocked him. That probably wasn't the resolution he was hoping for, but I wasn't interested in giving him any kind of peace. And sure, I could have been harsher, but I think my words will linger in his head for a long time. On May 4th, 2021, Nina officially became Nina the Frog. For the past 2 months, we've had long, serious conversations about our future. Nina made one thing crystal clear. She never wanted anyone else. She wanted my last name, she wanted to be my wife, and she wanted me to be Anna's father. I adore this kid. She just turned 6 last month, and she idolizes me. I'm the first father figure she's had since her biological dad walked out on her 2 years ago. Nina has always been careful about who she brings into her daughter's life. She never lets a man near Anna unless he's truly staying. I am staying. And speaking of kids, 17 and Anna have become inseparable. The big brother-little sister bond they've developed is nothing short of incredible. He's protective of her, and he takes that role seriously. My therapist told me it's a good sign. 17 sees an innocence in Anna that he wants to protect, something he feels he lost too soon. So, last Monday, Nina and I went to City Hall and made it official. It took 24 hours to process the marriage license. The big reveal, completely uneventful. Oz barely reacted, saying, "As if we didn't all see this coming," while my sister immediately started taking bets on when a pregnancy announcement would follow. Turns out we thought we had been keeping our relationship low-key, but everyone already knew. That was pretty funny. Some will say it happened too fast. And yeah, I once said I'd never get married again. But that was before Nina and I fully understood what we meant to each other. This woman has poured her heart out to me, telling me in painful detail how she had loved me for 25 years. Even during her own marriage, she had secretly resented the fact that Sue was the one I had chosen. She admitted there were moments when she considered having an affair with me, but she never could, because that's not the kind of person she is. She has given me so much, asking for so little in return. Even the woman I married and raised 2 children with never showed me this level of love. I'd be an idiot not to give her my name, so now she has it. And we're in the early stages of filing for me to adopt Anna. As for Sue, I haven't spoken to her in 4 months, since my last visit to our former home. But I still hear things through a few remaining mutual friends. A realtor friend of mine told me she sold the house. He even helped her get a job as a clerical assistant at his firm, which meant I could finally stop the financial support payments. She now lives in a small apartment near her workplace, set up with his help. She's surviving, but she's a shell of who she used to be. She keeps to herself, barely socializes, and has yet to recover physically from her breakdown. The last update I got was back in March. I thanked my friend for looking out for her, but told him I didn't need to hear anything else. She's no longer my concern. I have no doubt she knows about Nina and me. Some of our mutual acquaintances have mentioned it, and with 17 turning 18 soon, there's nothing tying us together anymore. I have no reason to speak to her ever again. And I won't, and that's it. This journey of betrayal, revenge, pain, and ultimately renewal is finally over. Life has a way of pushing you forward, even when you feel like you're standing still. But now, standing on the other side of everything, I realize I was never standing still. I was always moving, always evolving, even when the pain tried to convince me otherwise. The past year has been a test I never signed up for, but one I passed nonetheless. I walked through fire, endured betrayal, and faced the harsh truth that the life I thought I was building was never as solid as I believed. But in losing what I once held dear, I gained something far more valuable: clarity, strength, freedom. For years, I gave my love, trust, and loyalty to a woman who didn't cherish it. And for a long time, I thought that was my biggest mistake. But now I see the truth. The mistake wasn't loving her. It wasn't choosing to build a life with her. The mistake was believing that love alone could make a person honorable, that devotion could be enough to keep betrayal at bay. It wasn't. Some people will throw everything away for something fleeting, something meaningless. And Sue did just that. But me? I've rebuilt, I've moved forward, and I've done it on my terms. Nina and I are creating something real, something built on decades of quiet, unspoken understanding. I never expected her to be the person standing beside me at the end of all this, but now I can't imagine it being anyone else. She loves me in a way I didn't think was possible, in a way that doesn't need proving. It just is. And for the first time in a long, long time, I feel safe. I feel whole. My youngest son is healing, piece by piece, finding his way back to trust. My oldest is standing strong, forging his own path. And me? I'm doing the same. We've all been through hell, but we're still here. And that means something. As for Sue, I don't think about her anymore. She made her choices, and I made mine. Her name is just another page in my past, one that no longer holds any weight. People say forgiveness is the key to healing, but I disagree. Healing comes when you stop letting the past own you. I don't forgive Sue. I never will, and that's okay, because I don't need to. That part of my life is over. This isn't about revenge. It was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my right to be with someone who values and respects me. I have that now.